Shabbat Shalom. This is Barbara, and I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. And I'm serving as your host today, and Brother Pete is your co-host.
And I, Pete, is also welcome you aboard. Thank you for joining us to hear this important work.
Well, here is the title, Breaking News. Continuous weekly cycle is proven false. Saturday does not go all the way back to the creation Sabbath. And the weekly cycle has been interrupted and changed by many days, and the whole world didn't adopt the Roman Gregorian calendar till as recent as 2016 and 1929, 1927, 1918 for Russia. And all the Jews and Muslims and Christians worship on a Roman Catholic calendar, commissioned by Pope Gregory XIII, and he is the namesake for that calendar. So here are some of the facts to go along with this news. Well, the Julian calendar began in 46 to 45 BC with Julius Caesar, and he separated the months and weeks from the moon, and he had a continuous 8-day cycle. Now, this would have been at the time when Yeshua was here. He did not follow a Roman calendar. He had a 7-day week, as is in the scriptures. Well, in AD 321, Constantine created a compromise calendar. He blended the Hebrew idea of a 7-day week with the Julian concept of a continuous weekly cycle, and added that veneration of the sun god from Mithraism to create the Roman calendar that's used today, with having Saturday as a 7th day of a week. Well, in 1582, when Pope Gregory XIII introduced his Gregorian calendar, Europe adhered to the Julian calendar, first implemented by Julius Caesar in 46 BC. Since the Roman emperor system miscalculated the length of the solar year by 11 minutes, the calendar has since fallen out of sync with the seasons. You'll see on this calendar here to the right, the Gregorian calendar that took place in 1582. The day was Thursday the 4th, and it was changed to the 15th on a Friday. I'm going to explain that a little bit further. Pope Gregory didn't design the Gregorian calendar. Although Pope Gregory authorized the new calendar and it's named after him, he didn't come up with it on his own. He appointed a commission led by a physician, Aloysius Lillis, an astronomer, Christopher Clavis, to solve the problem, and after 5 years, fixed the problem. So here we go. The Gregorian calendar skips several days, as you may have noticed over here on the left. To get the calendar back in sync with astronomical events like the vernal equinox or the winter solstice, a number of days were dropped. The papal bull issued by Pope Gregory XIII in 1582 decreed that 10 days be dropped when switching to the Gregorian calendar. However, the later the switch occurred, the more days had to be omitted. And it took more than 300 years. Maybe you didn't know that. It took more than 300 years for all the different countries to change from the Julian calendar to the Roman Gregorian calendar. So they went to sleep on a Thursday and they woke up on a Friday, 10 days later. Well, this always bothered me when I was a girl. We gave Bible studies to people and showed them that the days of the week never changed. The calendar, really the schedule of Sunday through Saturday had never been changed. We thought it went all the way back to creation. But it always bothered me. And so I made a little chart up here showing if you were on an island and you didn't get the memo about the Gregorian calendar changing, and you've been charting Saturday Sabbath since 321 with Constantine, You would have thought there were 2 Saturdays there. You would have thought on the 6th and the 13th there was a Saturday. But all these 11 days were skipped with a continuance of Thursday to Friday. But really, if you were counting, say, stick figures on your wall and keeping track of Saturdays, maybe you're in a cave somewhere, this would have been a big mistake. And I don't know, Brother Pete, if you have any comments about all these skipped days?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
So the Gregorian calendar is useless, at least to astronomers, because they have to have the Julian calendar, because the Gregorian calendar has the 10-day hiatus in it. So to calculate any positions backward in time, astronomers always use a Julian date. So though Pope Gregory's papal bull reforming the calendar had no power beyond the Catholic Church, Catholic countries, including Spain, Portugal, and Italy, swiftly adopted the new system for the civil affairs. And some Protestants viewed the Gregorian calendar as a Catholic plot. Just go ahead, Brother Pete.
Yes, the Catholic Church didn't have any power over these Protestant states, so they couldn't be forced to switch calendars. Protestants were suspicious of the new calendar and viewed it as a, quote, suspicious Catholic intrusion. Some even believed that it was the work of the Antichrist. European Protestants, however, largely rejected the change because of its ties to the papacy, fearing it was an attempt to silence the Protestant Reformation. It wasn't until 1700 that Protestant Germany switched over, and England held out until 1752. Orthodox countries clung to the Julian calendar until even later, and their national churches have never embraced the Gregorian's reforms. Below here we see the calendar for September of 1752 in the UK. We see Wednesday the 2nd went to Thursday the 14th, now adding 11 days because they were so late they had an extra day to add. It's actually 12 days, excuse me. An interesting fact, there was once a February 30th. When Sweden swapped the Julian calendar for the Gregorian, they didn't sacrifice days like other countries. Instead, they placed a February 30th on their calendar. The plan was to omit leap days over the next 40 years to remove those extra 10 days. The plan didn't work out well. In 1712, the Great Northern War broke out. The war was so brutal that no one remembered to remove the following 2 leap days. The powers to be at that time went back to the Julian calendar in 1712. Finally, they jumped over to the Gregorian calendar in 1752 for good, and they never saw February 30th again. That year, Sweden made a correction of 11 days by letting February the 17th be followed by March 1st. But everyone did not love the reform of the calendars. Many people thought they had been robbed of 11 days of their lives. You can check out the links provided.
So in Sweden, in 1699, they decided to adopt the calendar the following year in 1700. But instead of doing the correction of the calendar at the same time, Sweden decided to do it gradually during the following 11 years by reducing 1 day per year during the time period. I guess the whole point of this is if you lived in Sweden and you were counting off Saturday Sabbaths that had been been on the calendar since 321 of Constantine, all this confusion of adding 1 day or 11 days or 12 days would have thrown off your count. In 1753, Sweden, including Finland, was ready to adopt the Gregorian calendar. In that year, Sweden made a correction of 11 days by letting February 17 be followed by March 1. But everyone did not love the reform of calendars. Many people thought that they had been robbed of 11 days of their life. And Britain's adoption of the Gregorian calendar sparked riots and protests in 1752. And you see here, Wednesday was the 2nd and Thursday was the 14th. And people said, give us back our 11 days. But riots in England, were all about those 11 days. And according to some accounts, English citizens did not react kindly after an act of Parliament advanced the calendar overnight from September 2 to September 14. And like I said, the rioters were in the streets saying, give us back our days. Well, and another interesting fact about the Gregorian calendar is that England was a year behind Belgium, Spain, and Italy for 170 years. And don't forget, when England switched to the Gregorian calendar on September 2, 1752, they woke up on September 14. And because we here in the United States were still a colony, this meant the occasion happened in the States as well.
Benjamin Franklin welcomed the change in the States by writing, "It is pleasant for an old man to be able to go to bed on September 2nd and not have to get up until September 14th.
So here it is, a Wednesday the 2nd, and then Thursday the 14th is when they got up. So the later that it happened in time, this is a couple hundred years later, from 1582 when it first started. Here we are at 1752, just now accepting the Gregorian calendar in the United States. So another example for me that I'm thinking is, okay, maybe you're up here in some mountain in, I don't know, Montana or Denver, I don't know, and you didn't get the memo about the UK changing the dates, and you were circling off Saturday Sabbath because Constantine made a Saturday Sabbath in 321. Okay, so if you were counting off all those dates, you would have had 2 Saturday Sabbaths there that nobody else had, because everybody went to sleep on a Wednesday and got up on a Thursday.
How many days were lost from the calendar in the year when England changed the Gregorian calendar? 12 days were lost in 1752. England was 170 years behind much of Europe in changing from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar. Since England's identity was so much tied up with the hatred and suspicion of Catholics, no way did they want to accept the new papal calendar, even if it was scientifically or at least astronomically accurate. When Parliament in 1751 passed the act to alter the calendar, the act made absolutely no mention of Pope Gregory the 13th, whose calendar it was.
So the Gregorian calendar adopted by the world. And the reason I have this picture up here is Pope Gregory had the sign of the dragon, and we did a whole YouTube about that, the dragon and the Catholic Church. And that was his sign, and that was his seal. So why is the Gregorian calendar accepted all over the world as a calendar for most purposes, but only 32% of the world is Christian? And all these areas here on this map weren't under Western rule at the time of the Gregorian calendar. but the whole world has adopted it by now. One of the latest ones, most countries adopted the Gregorian calendar hundreds of years ago, but there were a few stragglers slower to embrace the change. China, 1912, Bulgaria, 1916, Russia, 1917, just under 100 years ago. Greece, 1923, and Turkey, 1927. So most recently, Saudi Arabia replaced the lunar-based Hira calendar with the Gregorian in 2016. They said it was for business purposes and for paying employees and things. And although the country was 434 years late, they always say it's better late than never. So Saudi Arabia just now accepted this 6 years ago. So you know what? We thought when we grew up that Saturday went all the way back to creation. We thought the Gregorian calendar went all the way back to creation. And here it is, a fairly new calendar and just now being accepted by some countries. And this will show a lot of the Gregorian adoption dates. Some were early, 1582 when it happened, then 1600s, 1900s, as we've already went through, and some in the less than 100 years ago, and some just a few years ago.
The longer a country waited to shift to the Gregorian calendar, the more days needed to be removed. In 1752, England and its colonies went to sleep on September 2nd and rose on September 14th, as per the Calendar Act of 1750. Russia didn't change calendars until February 14th, 1918, and skipped a whole 13 days, meaning their October Revolution of 1917 actually happened, according to today's dating system, in November. In Russia, the Gregorian calendar was accepted after the October Revolution. On the 24th of January, 1918, the Council of the People's Commissioners issued a decree that Wednesday 31st, January 1918, was to be followed by Thursday the 14th of February 1918, thus dropping 13 days from the calendar. With that change, the October Revolution itself, once converted to the new calendar, took place on 7th of November. Again, you can follow these links to look more at it. Alaska, darned October 1867. 2 Fridays in a row? Most genealogists know that in 1752, the calendar changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. Most also know that the calendar change occurred in different years in different countries. Most genealogists may not know about the oddity that is Alaska, along with a general discussion on the controversy to the Gregorian calendar. There is a weird situation that occurred in Alaska when it was transferred from Russia to the United States. The day before the transfer was Friday, the 6th of October, 1867, in Russia. Russia was still on the Julian calendar. The day of the transfer was Saturday, the 7th of October, 1867 in Russia. The date corresponds with Saturday, the 19th October, 1867, Gregorian calendar. However, like a modern-day traveler who gains a day flying from Russia to America, Alaska gained another day. It had 2 Fridays in a row. That made the official transfer day Friday the 18th of October, 1867, by the Gregorian calendar. And again, you can check the links for more information.
So a similar adjustment the adjustment of the dateline occurred in 1892 when King Malotalalupa of Samoa was persuaded by a major American business house trading in that region to adopt the American day reckoning instead of the Asian day reckoning. In a fine stroke of diplomatic flattery, this was put into effect by a royal proclamation in Samoan Times of 16th of June, announcing that the 4th of July, a Monday, would be celebrated twice. Again, if you're marking stick figures off to know when your Saturday Sabbath was since the time of Constantine, all these changes are going to mess up your count. And then, okay, Brother Pete, go ahead and tell about this modern change that happened.
Yes. At the end, now we're talking 2011 now, at the end of Thursday, the 29th, December 11, Samoa continued directly to Saturday, the 31st December of 2011, skipping an entire calendar day of Friday. So note they doubled up, and here they have jumped back by skipping. So 30th December 2011, and effectively redrawing the international dateline. The South Pacific island nation of Samoa has jumped forward in time by switching to the west side of the international dateline 119 years after it moved the other way. Prime Minister Tulepa Saliel Malalageo said boasting trade was the chief reason for shifting back, saying that moving forward a day would make doing business with key partners far, far easier and more convenient. And discussing the international dateline is the imaginary line on the earth that separates two consecutive calendar days. The date in the eastern hemisphere to the left of the line is always one day ahead of the date in the western hemisphere.
So the Samoa, the International Dateline Shift, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The event on midnight as December 29, 2011 ended, Samoa and Tokla, probably saying these wrong, Toklia, fast-forwarded to December 31. In other words, these countries chose to move from the United States side of the International Dateline to the New Zealand and Australia side to benefit trade and tourism. Okay, well that meant that the seventh day of the week was now Sunday. What were the Adventists on Samoa and Toklia to do? This strategic financial maneuver created a Sabbath paradox for Seventh-day Adventists as the cycle of their week and the count to their Saturday Sabbath was interrupted. So this still remains a conflict over there, with some marking off their calendars, trying to keep Saturday, marking it all off, and others going to worship on Sunday as their government said they should go a day forward.
This meant that what was supposed to be Sunday would now be Monday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Sunday, all because of an arbitrary human decision to move the artificial international dateline. Think about it. Suddenly, what was an uninterrupted cycle of 7 days leading to successive 7-day holy days was totally altered. What then would the faithful do if they wanted to keep their respective seventh holy day, If they insisted on maintaining their 7-day cycle, they would now be 1 day out of sync with the working world. If they conceded to the shift, accepting the new dates for their respective holy days, they would have to abandon their belief that the seventh holy day they had observed for all their lives was part of an uninterrupted succession of 7-day week cycle from creation to that time. which would be an act of disobedience regarding observance of their respective holy day. What would you do if instead of Samoa, it was Casper, Georgia, or Cleveland, Ohio, or Memphis, Tennessee, or Mount Ararat, Turkey, or Sydney, Australia, or the Philippines? Would you concede to man's imposed artificial shift in time reckoning, or would you maintain your belief in an uninterrupted Sabbath from creation week and throw yourself completely out of sync with the rest of the economic working world, perhaps losing your job, or even worse, your friends who chose otherwise?
So the lunar calendar, the Samoa dateline dilemma shows that one cannot use the international dateline in determining the Sabbath. In fact, the Old Testament Sabbath does not use the modern Gregorian calendar. The calendar used by Moses was based upon the phases of the moon and not a continuous weekly cycle. The Old Testament calendar starts every month on New Moon Day, and the Sabbaths are always in the same place. As it shows over here on this calendar, the last New Moon Day is day 1, and there are 6 working days and a Sabbath. 6 working days and a Sabbath. That places all the Sabbaths at the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th, according to the phases of the moon. The moon is the clock which orbits around the earth and provides a reference for biblical time. If this reference is ignored, then an arbitrary man-made marker such as International Dateline would have to be substituted. Genesis 1:14 says, "And Yahweh said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." That sounds like a calendar to me. And also the word for seasons is Strong's number 4150, meaning religious festivals. Notice that Genesis 1:14 says that the religious festivals are designated by the lights in the heaven. And so does Psalms 104:19. It identifies light as the moon.
The movements and phases of the moon are very precise and dependable. It makes them function just like a giant clock in the sky. We can observe the moon's phases as they wax to the first quarter phase and build to the full moon phase. Then they decrease to the last quarter phase and waning until conjunction. We can measure the decreasing distance between the phases to know what time and day of the month it is. If you look at the chart to the left, on a given Sabbath, you can look up and see one of those beautiful marks of the moon in the sky. So you'd see either a clean half being either the third quarter or first quarter, depending upon which side of the moon is illuminated. And then you see that big, beautiful full moon at the full moon of the Sabbath. And then, of course, you'd see the new moon. You'd see no moon during the new moon cycle, during the new moon period. The reason most Jews today keep Saturday is the same exact reason that most Christians keep Sunday, because of Constantine's calendar change and the persecutions by which he enforced these changes. Prior to this, in 46 to 45 BC, Julius Caesar, the Julian calendar, had separated the months and weeks from the moon and made a continuous 8-day cycle. But he did not force it on the other nations living within the empire. In AD 321, Constantine created a compromise calendar. He blended the Hebrew idea of a 7-day week with the Julian concept of a continuous weekly cycle and added the veneration of the sun god from the Mithraism to create the Roman calendar used today. He did enforce this calendar upon the entire Roman Empire with military power. Because of these changes, which were enforced by persecutions across the Roman Empire, the Jewish Sanhedrin met for the last time around AD 350 and modified their calendar to the form used by most Jews today, in which the Sabbath is on Saturday. That's a continuous cycling Saturday. Other feast days are determined using a form of the lunar calendar.
So, in order to keep the sun god from being number 2 to Saturn, Constantine venerated the day of the sun, elevating the day of the sun to the number 1 position. Well, over here we have an official Roman calendar that was found in 104 AD, and you see Saturn with the sickle was the first day of the week. Sunday was the second day. There's the sun rays. Moon day, there's the moon. All of this, and Venus, all the way to Venus. Constantine put Saturn day as day 7 for a worship day, and put Sunday as day 1 to venerate the worship of the sun god. So maybe you didn't know Saturn day used to be day 1, and it was moved to day 7.
So yes, Saturday is now the 7th day of the pagan planetary week that was adopted by the pagan papal Rome. But Saturday is not the 7th day of the Heavenly Father's calendar. It is not the Sabbath given to Israel. And it clearly is not the 7th day of the week if you count backwards to creation. It has only been the 7th day of the week since AD 321, and not a second longer.
So the continuous weekly cycle is proven false. And you need to think about, what calendar did Yeshua use? Did he use the calendar of Israel, or did he use a Roman Catholic calendar or a Roman Julian calendar? No, he did not. So I just hope that you will go to our website to access more information about all the calendar changes with the Gregorian calendar. And the dragon and the Gregorian calendar is one of them. And what Sabbath did Yeshua keep? What calendar did Yeshua keep? There are many articles and YouTube videos there discussing the continuous weekly cycle that has not gone back since creation day. There's always been a new moon day, and there's always been 6 working days and a Sabbath, but according to the calendar in the heavens.
Barb,
so
I
our
have
website is... Okay, good. Thank you.
A thought that has come to me as we were covering this, and we think that globalization is a new thing. But all these countries we have been seeing have been undergoing global or international pressures to all get on one common date system. That's really what they're experiencing. And each of these nations are holding out or succumbing to the changes that are being pressured by global. And the first of those is not just the calendar, but it's the disconnect of month from the moon. Of course, the word moon, the word month comes from the word moon, because originally months were governed by the moon. And that disconnect was one of the first globalization pressures that the world actually succumbed to.
So we grew up our whole life with a paper calendar on the wall instead of looking up in the heavens for our calendar.
Absolutely.
And those moon phases are 7 days apart on the original calendar of 30 days always before the 29.5. Every phase was announced 7 days in between. What a beautiful calendar, Brother Pete, that our Father put in the sky.
Truly.
And so I hope you'll go to our website website. There's so much more information there. We just touched on a little bit of it today. And the website is lunarsabbathday.com. And thank you, everyone, for being here today.